This episode is brought to you by CarterComics.com. It's your one-stop shop for all your comic needs, whether it be graded or raw. Carter Comics has got it all. All you gotta do is go to CarterComics.com, fill your card up with all their amazing comics. Use the discount code FREAKNET, FREAKNET. Save you 10% at checkout. Not only on their website, but also at their eBay account. And the link to eBay can be found on their homepage at CarterComics.com. Again, CarterComics.com is your one-stop shop for all comic needs. Greetings, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of this freaky show. It is a month-long celebration of Halloween over here on Freakin Studios, and of course this episode is hosted by Travesty, and of course my co-host for the month,
The Freak Joe.
Yeah, I don't know why I rambled there. I just wanted to try something new. I wasn't sure how. I
liked it.
Thank you. I'm glad. Glad. This episode we're going to talk about. So last episode we kind of talked about horror movie characters that were pretty much inspired by serial killers. So I figured this episode we're going to talk about the serial killers that aren't really as popularly wide known. Obviously we know the ones like John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ed Gein, John Wayne Gacy, BTK killer. Did I say John Wayne Gacy twice?
Yeah, I think so. That's right.
Ted Bundy, BTK killer, serial killer like that. But there's a handful of serial killers that have been out there. Some older, actually some very recent too. So we're going to run through a list of all of them, kind of talk about a little bit about who they are, the era of their killing sprees, and kind of like what they entailed inside of that. Before we dive into any of that, real quick, I just want to let everyone know that is it this week's episode of Geekcast Live I was on?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So for those of you who listen to our podcast, once in a while you hear Joey talk about Geekcast Live. At the end of the show, talks about the other podcast that he's been on for either a decade or nearly a decade, 10 years. So,
yeah.
GCR and Cartoon Joe invited me over onto Geekcast Live for a special episode where we kind of talked about hauntings or feeling terror, stuff like that. It's cool because it's always exciting. I mean, I know that like whenever I'm asked about like ghost stories or ghost encounters or my own personal experiences and stuff, I kind of always go back to like the same stories. And this probably talking with you guys probably the first time I was actually excited about retelling those scenarios, just because it really truly seemed like it freaked Ryan out a little.
Oh yeah, definitely did.
So it was definitely entertaining to me. Hopefully you guys find it entertaining and everything. And yeah, so make sure you do check out, Geekcast Live over at hold on, I remember. God, you say it all the time. Is it GCL.threadless? No, that's
our merch.
That's your merch. Yeah, what's
Violent Press.
ViolentPress.com. Yeah, I always have GCL.ninja stuck in my head. ViolentPress.com. Go check that out. I heard Rob Bates created that website.
He did a good job.
Yeah, so check out this weekend's episode, but also check out all their episodes because it's fantastic. If you're into the geeky stuff, it's definitely a place for you to go. And as GCR said on the episode, they are going to focus a few episodes this month kind of on Halloween. So not only can you get the Halloween celebration over here on this freaky show, but you can also get the Halloween celebration over on Geekcast Live. So this is like Freak Joe's non-harmful spread of something. So congratulations, Joe. You are spreading Halloween spirit.
Trying.
So congrats. Let's run through some serial killers, and then of course we're going to end the show just like we did last episode with Freaky Tales, and we'll get into Freaky Tales here towards the end. But let's talk about some lesser-known serial killers in the world. And Joe, I'm going to give you the name of the serial killer, and just tell me if you heard of him or not. There's a good chance you may not have. There's some of them I kind of remember hearing about, but not so much. But have you ever heard of a serial killer called Samuel Little?
No.
No. Okay. So Samuel Little is known as the choke and stroke killer. He was a transient, so not really any professions listed or documented. His spree actually ran between 1970 and 2005. As of right now, there's 60 confirmed victims, but speculation of 93. So, Samuel Little actually is currently still incarcerated and alive today.
Oh, maybe it's the writing of that. But if that article's older than 2020, he died December 30th, 2020.
Yes, she did die in 2020. Never mind. I don't know why I don't have the dates of their deaths here. I did that for the other one. I should have done it for this one. I do remember he is recent, so yes. But no, he did die in 2020. Now that you think about it. Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Yep, no problem.
Kermit Baron Gosnell.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So, this guy is technically considered a serial killer for one very distinct reason. So, I will say he was known as an abortion doctor. That doesn't make him a serial killer. That's not. The part that makes him a serial killer is between 1989 and 2010, there were confirmed 48 deaths, but could be upwards of 200 plus. And the reason he's considered a serial killer is because he was aborting born alive children. So a former
he was killing them after they were born?
Yeah, so a former abortion doctor who ran a Philadelphia abortion clinic where authorities found remains of 47 late-term aborted and born alive children, many killed after birth. Gosnell was also convicted in a death of an abortion recipient. Staff testimony indicated hundreds of cases of children born alive during abortion procedures and then killed by Gosnell. So, being an abortion doctor didn't make him a serial killer. It was the post-living murders of the infants that made him the serial killer. And these, by the way, this list is from online. These aren't I didn't just pick and choose. I chose a list of lesser knowns. So.
Yeah.
Probably the older ones that we're going to talk about today, Joshua and William Harper. Sound familiar?
No. I know some people who are Harpers, but I don't think I know these guys.
So, also known as Micah Big Harp or Willie Little Harp, these guys were considered river pirates. So, obviously just robbing people, going up and down rivers and stuff like that here in the United States. Their spree was from 1797 to 1804. Based on documentation, confirmed 39 murdered, but could have been upwards of 50 plus.
Wow.
Wesley Allen Dodd.
Let's see, this sounds vaguely familiar, but I can't place it.
So he's one of the more well-known Canadian serial killers.
Oh, okay.
He was known as the Vancouver child killer. Within a 2-month span, he murdered 3 people, which 3 people do consider you a serial killer. Dodd claimed that he was never
especially if you're Canadian.
Exactly, yeah. Just actually bumping someone in the street, you're a Canadian aggressor. It just happens.
Right.
Dodd claimed that he was never emotionally or sexually abused, but oddly enough, he began exposing himself to children at the age of 13. From there, he escalated to molestation and then murder in 1989. By the time police caught up with him, he murdered 3 young boys and attempted to kidnap a 4th.
Yeesh.
Randy Stephen Kraft. Okay.
Nope.
He's known as the Freeway Killer, the Southern California
Freeway Killer,
the Freeway Killer, the Southern California Strangler, or the Scorecard Killer. So different names. His spree went from 1971 to 1983. I hate using the word spree because I really like the candy.
Yeah, right.
His period of crimes, 1971 to 1983. They estimate between 16 and 67 deaths. Between 72 and 73, Randon Stephen Kraft, a scorecard killer, is believed to have murdered as many as 51 young men along California freeways. After each murder, he added coded references to his victims on a piece of notebook paper in the trunk of his car. Although they were over 50 entries, he was only convicted of 16 murders, many of which included sodomy, torture, mutilation. Kraft is currently on death row in Marin County, California. So, so.
Awful.
I don't think I'm going to get this name right, but Freakin Wardrop.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. No unique serial killer name. So, not so lesser known. No cool serial killer name. 2 year span, 1984, 1986. 5 victims. Freakin Wardrop said police could have caught him sooner if they paid a bit more attention. Unfortunately, Wardrop murdered 5 women before he was taken into custody and sentenced to life in prison. Although Wardrop is a lesser-known serial killer, he's a popular figure in the world of forensic science, and an incredible combination of ingenuity and good police work. Detectives stalked Wardrop and retrieved his empty coffee cup from the garbage. At that point, they were able to find the DNA evidence they needed for conviction. So, not really known, but apparently forensic science kind of thinks him.
Yeah. Always dumb mistakes.
It is. It really is. Let's see here. Arthur Shawcross. No. Butcher of Rochester. Crimes were committed between 1972 and 1989. 14 victims confirmed. Arthur Shawcross, otherwise known as the Butcher of Rochester, killed 14 women between 72 and 89 after he was released on parole. After raping and murdering 2 young women, Shawcross should have never seen the light of day again. However, in a massive miscarriage of justice, he was released back into society. While dumping his 14th body, Shawcross paused to urinate off the bridge, at which point he was taken into custody by a surveillance team. He served 18 years of a life sentence before dying of cardiac arrest. So, if you're going to commit a crime, just hold it.
Yeah.
Derek Todd.
What a shame.
I know, right? Yeah, he could have
ruined parole for the rest of people.
Mm-hmm. Derek Todd Lee.
No, never heard of him.
Okay. So a little more recent, the Baton Rouge serial killer. 1992 to 2003 is where he committed his crimes. Confirmed 7, could be more. Lee was found guilty of murdering at least 7 women in the Baton Rouge area in 2004. Before killing his victims, Lee would stalk them, watch them in their homes, and then escalate to rape and murder. He died in January 2014 while awaiting his death sentence. This one's actually kind of unique. Yeah, this is actually kind of unique now that. So I've been watching the R. Kelly documentary on Netflix, Surviving Kelly.
Yeah.
Which, dude, it's a fantastic documentary if you ever want. I mean, it's unfortunate what happened, but the detail that they go into it and the fact that they're talking about all these stories that are happening, and this is all like in 2019 before his conviction and trial and everything. It's fucking wild. And then they actually made like a kind of like a sequel with more of it going on. It's fucking wild. But I bring that up because R. Kelly was also known as the Pied Piper, luring young girls in with his music, promising them music and all that shit.
Right.
Well, Dean Corll, Corll, was also known as the Candyman or the Pied Piper. 3-year span of murder between 1970 and 1973, 28 plus murders in that time span. He's a former member of the U.S. Army. Corll's family owned a candy shop in Houston, and he is known as a friendly guy who often gave free treats to children. Later, his ulterior motive became known when he was charged with abducting, raping, torturing, and murdering as many as 28 young boys. His heinous crimes might have gone undiscovered had he not been fatally shot by his accomplice, Elmer Wayne Henley. Dennis Nilsen.
No, he keeps showing up on these lists of lesser known serial killers, but I've never heard of him.
Yeah. Well, known as the Kindly Killer, he ran amok between 1978 and 1983, killing 12 to 15 people. Some have called Nilsen the British Jeffrey Dahmer in reference to the elaborate rituals he performed each and every murder. He often kept his victims' bodies for days and weeks at a time, bathing, dressing, and displaying them around the house. However, once they began to decompose, Nilsen burned the remains or flushed them down the toilet.
Yeesh.
Yeah. So, probably not the best one to end on, but yeah, that's my list of the lesser known serial killers. Yeah, yeah. If you guys know of any serial killers that are maybe even lesser known but have a history like these people did, share with us. Share with us on our Facebook page or comment on the YouTube video when it comes out and we release that and everything, and or comment on Podbean. Wherever you do listen to our podcast or anything, Spotify. I know you can comment on there. Share with us your favorite lesser known serial killer. Maybe one that we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Fascinating.
Okay. Right. It's wild because even listening to all the serial killer podcasts and hearing people talk about all these infamous fucking people. There's always still somebody more. There's always still more. Some of them kind of ring a bell. The Candyman one actually, he sounds familiar, but it's actually because of his accomplice who killed him.
Yeah, right. I remember, wasn't he? Maybe it was a different Candyman, but I remember there was one Candyman who the movie was based off of him, and he would he had a way to get into people's houses through a service corridor or something.
I know what you're talking about, and I'm not quite sure if it's the same person, but
yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the fact that this guy got away with killing 28 children in that time span, and the fact that the only reason that he stopped was because his accomplice killed him. So it's and it actually I want to look more into that now that I'm kind of talking more about it with you, because it's what happened at that point where his accomplice just said enough is enough.
What was too far for that accomplice? 27 kids fine, 28 kids too much.
Right, yeah, it's 27 is my lucky number. Can we just stop here? And then maybe the Candyman said, I promise you I won't do it again. And then the next day, oops.
Broke his promise.
Right,
and then he had to die.
Yeah, so it's unique. Maybe I'll look into that because they're always interesting. I mean, like I said, when I watch the documentaries, I always like the true crime ones and learning about people and their lives through why they chose to do criminal acts. Now, even if there's no answers, like the surviving victims, when they talk about it and shit, it's always fucking unique. So
yeah.
With that said, guys, we're going to dive into Freaky Tales here in a minute. As we kind of mentioned, make sure you do follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search This Freakin' Show. If you want to find any of our episodes, just search This Freakin' Show on Google. Any place that our podcast shows up will pop up there, iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever it's called now, Podbean, Amazon Music, wherever podcasts are listened, that's where we're at. And of course, if you want to watch the episode, you could do so over on the Freaknet Studios YouTube channel, where, as through the month of October, our Freaky Cemetery Vlogs of Michigan are currently being released throughout the month. So, with that being said, we will wrap up our show with Freak Joe's next Freaky Tale.
The Water Ghost of Harrowby Hall by John Kendrick Bangs. The trouble with Harrowby Hall was that it was haunted. And what was worse, the ghost did not content itself, merely appearing at the bedside of the afflicted person who saw it, but persisted in remaining there for one mortal hour before it would disappear. It never appeared except on Christmas Eve, and then as the clock was striking 12, in which respect alone was it lacking in that originality which in these days is a sine qua non of success in spectral life. The owners of Harrowby Hall had done their utmost to rid themselves of the damp and dewy lady who rose up out of the bedroom floor at midnight, but without avail. They had tried stopping the clock so that the ghost would not know when it was midnight, but she made her appearance just the same, with that fearful, miasmatic personality of hers, and there she would stand until everything about her was thoroughly saturated. Then the owners of Harrowby Hall caulked up every crack in the floor with the very best quality of hemp, and over this was placed layers of tar and canvas. The walls were made waterproof, the doors and windows likewise, the proprietors having conceived the notion that the unexercised lady would find it difficult to leak into the room after these precautions had been taken. But even this did not suffice. The following Christmas Eve she appeared as promptly as before, and frightened the occupant of the room quite out of his senses by sitting down alongside him, and gazing with her cavernous blue eyes into his. And he noticed, too, that in her long, aqueously bony fingers, bits of dripping seaweed were entwined, the ends hanging down, and these ends she drew across her forehead until he became like one insane. And then he swooned away, and was found unconscious in his bed the next morning by his host, simply saturated with sea water and fright, from the combined effects of which he never recovered, dying 4 years later of pneumonia and nervous prostration at the age of 78. The next year, the master of Harrowby Hall decided not to have the best spare bedroom opened at all, thinking that perhaps the ghost's thirst for making herself disagreeable would be satisfied by haunting the furniture. But the plan was unavailing, as unavailing as the many that had preceded it. The ghost appeared as usual in the room, that is, it was supposed she did, for the hangings were dripping wet the next morning. And in the parlor below the haunted room, a great damp spot appeared on the ceiling. Finding no one there, she immediately set out to learn the reason why, and chose none other to haunt than the owner of the Harrowby himself. She found him in his own cozy room, drinking whiskey undiluted, and felicitating himself upon having foiled her ghost ship, when all of a sudden the curl went out of his hair, his whiskey bottle filled and overflowed, and he was himself in a condition similar to that of a man who has fallen into a water butt. When he recovered from the shock, which was a painful one, he saw before him the lady of the cavernous eyes and seaweed fingers. The sight was so unexpected and so terrifying that he fainted, but immediately came to because of the vast amount of water in his hair, which, trickling down over his face, restored his consciousness. Now it so happened that the master of Harrowby was a brave man, and while he was not particularly fond of interviewing ghosts, especially such quenching ghosts as the one before him, he was not daunted by an apparition. He had paid the lady the compliment of fainting from the effects of his first surprise, and now now that he had come to, he intended to find out a few things he felt he had a right to know. He would have liked to put on a dry suit of clothes first, but the apparition declined to leave him for an instant until her hour was up, and he was forced to deny himself that pleasure. Every time he would move, she would follow him, with the result that everything she came in contact with got a ducking. In an effort to warm himself up, he approached the fire, an unfortunate move, as it turned out, because it brought the ghost directly over the fire, which immediately was extinguished. The whiskey became utterly valueless as a comforter to his chilled system because it was by this time diluted to a proportion of 90% of water. The only thing he could do was to ward off the evil effects of this encounter. He did, and that was to swallow 10 2-grain quinine pills, which he managed to put into his mouth before the ghost had time to interfere. Having done this, he turned with some asperity to the ghost and said, "Far be it from me to be impolite to a woman, madam, but I'm hanged if it wouldn't please me better if you'd stop these infernal visits of yours to this house. Go sit out on the lake if you like that sort of thing. Soak the water butt if you wish. But do not, I implore you, come into a gentleman's house and saturate him and his possessions in this way. It is damned disagreeable." "Henry Hartwick Oglethorpe," said the ghost in a gurgling voice, "you don't know what you are talking about." "Madam," returned the unhappy householder, I wish that remark were strictly truthful. I was talking about you. It would be shillings and pence, nay, pounds in my pocket, madam, if I did not know you. This is a bit of specious nonsense, returned the ghost, throwing a quart of indignation into the face of the master of Harrowby. It may rank as repartee, but as a comment upon my statement that you do not know what you are talking about, it savors of irrelevant impertinence. You do not know that I am compelled to haunt this place year after year by inexorable fate. It is no pleasure to me to enter this house and run and mildew everything I touch. I never aspired to be a shower bath, but it is my doom. Do you know who I am? No, I don't, returned the master of Harrowby. I should say that you are the Lady of the Lake, or Little Sally Waters. You are a witty man for your years, said the ghost. Well, my humor is drier than yours will ever be, returned the master. No doubt. I am never dry. I am the water ghost of Harrowby Hall, and dryness is a quality entirely beyond my wildest hope. I have been the incumbent of this highly unpleasant office for 200 years tonight. How the deuce did you ever come to get elected? Asked the master. Through a suicide, replied the spectre. I am the ghost of that fair maiden whose picture hangs over the mantelpiece in the drawing-room. I should have been your great-great-great-great-great-great-aunt if I had lived, Henry Hartwick Oglethorpe, for I was the own sister of your great-great-great-great-grandfather. But what induced you to get this house into such a predicament? I was not to blame, sir, returned the lady. It was my father's fault. He it was who built Harrowby Hall, and the haunted chamber was to have been mine. My father had it furnished in pink and yellow, knowing well that blue and grey formed the only combination of color I could tolerate. He did it merely to spite me, and with what I deem a proper spirit, I declined to live in the room. Whereupon my father said I could live there or on the lawn, he didn't care which. That night I ran from the house and jumped over the cliff into the sea. That was rash, said the master of Harrowby. So I've heard, returned the ghost. If I had known what the consequences were to be, I should not have jumped, but I really never realized what I was doing until after I was drowned. I had been drowned a week when a sea nymph came to me and informed me that I was to be one of her followers forever afterwards, adding that it should be my doom to haunt Harrowby Hall for 1 hour every Christmas Eve throughout the rest of eternity. I was to haunt that room on such a Christmas Eves as I found it inhabited, and if it turn out not to be inhabited, I was and am to expend the allotted hour with the head of the house. I'll sell the place. That you cannot do, for it is also required of me that I shall appear as the deeds are to be delivered to any purchaser, and divulge to him the awful secret of the house. Do you mean to tell me that on every Christmas Eve that I don't happen to have somebody in that guest chamber, you are going to haunt me wherever I may be, ruining my whiskey, taking all the curl out of my hair, extinguishing my fire, and soaking through to the skin? Demanded the master. You have stated the case, Oglethorpe, and what is more, said the water ghost, it doesn't make the slightest difference where you are. If I find that room empty, wherever you may be, I shall douse you with my spectral pres. Here the clock struck 1, and immediately the apparition faded away. It was perhaps more of a trickle than a fade, but as a disappearance, it was complete. By St. George and his dragon, ejaculated the master of Harrowby, wringing his hands. It is guineas to hot crust buns that next Christmas there's an occupant to that spare room, or I spend the night in a bathtub. But the master of Harrowby would have lost his wager, had there been any one there to take him up, for when Christmas Eve came again, he was in his grave, never having recovered from the cold contracted that awful night. Harrowby Hall was closed, and the heir to the estate was in London, where to him in his chambers came the same experience that his father had gone through, saving only that, being younger and stronger, he survived the shock. Everything in his rooms was ruined. His clocks were rusted in the works. A fine collection of water drawings was entirely obliterated by the onslaught of the water ghost. And what was worse, the apartments below his were drenched with the water soaking through the floors, a damage for which he was compelled to pay, and which resulted in his being requested by his landlady to vacate the premises immediately. The story of the visitation inflicted upon his family had gone abroad, and no one could be got to invite him out to any function save afternoon teas and receptions. Fathers of daughters declined to permit him to remain in their houses later than 8 o'clock at night, not knowing that some emergency might arise in the supernatural world which would require the unexpected appearance of the water ghost on nights other than Christmas Eve. And before the mystic hour, when weary churchyards, ignoring the rules which are supposed to govern polite society, began to yawn. Nor would the maids themselves have aught to do with him, fearing the destruction by the sudden incursion of aqueous femininity in the costumes which they held most dear. So the heir of Harrowby Hall resolved, as his ancestors for several generations before him had resolved, that something must be done. His first thought was to make one of his servants occupy the haunted room at the crucial moment, but in this he failed, because the servants themselves knew the history of that room and rebelled. None of his friends would consent to sacrifice their personal comfort to his, nor was there to be found in all England a man so poor as to be willing to occupy the doomed chamber on Christmas Eve for pay. Then thought came to the heir to have the fireplace in the room enlarged, so that he might evaporate the ghost at its first appearance, and he was felicitating himself upon the ingenuity of his plan when he remembered what his father had told him, how that no fire could withstand the lady's extremely contagious dampness. And then he bethought him of steam pipes. These, he remembered, could lie hundreds of feet deep in water, and still retain sufficient heat to drive the water away in vapor, and as a result of this, the haunted room was heated by steam to a withering degree, and the heir for 6 months attended daily the Turkish baths, so that when Christmas Eve came, he could himself withstand the awful temperature of that room. The scheme was only partially successful. The water ghost appeared at the specified time and found the heir of Harrowby prepared. But hot as the room was, it shortened her visit by no more than 5 minutes in the hour, during which time the nervous system of the young man was well nigh shattered, and the room itself was cracked and warped to an extent which required the outlay of a large sum of money to remedy. And worse than this, as the last drop of the water ghost was slowly sizzling itself out of the floor, she whispered to her would-be conqueror that his schemes would avail him nothing, because there was still water in great plenty where she came from, and that next year would find her rehabilitated and as exasperatingly saturated as ever. It was then that the natural action of the mind, in going from one extreme to the other, suggested to the ingenious heir of Harrowby the means by which the water ghost was ultimately conquered, and happiness once more came within the grasp of the house of Oglethorpe. The heir provided himself with a warm suit of fur underclothing. Donning this with the furry side in, he placed over it a rubber garment, tight-fitting, which he wore just as a woman wears a jersey. On top of this, he placed another set of underclothing, this suit made of wool, and over this was a second rubber garment like the first. Upon his head he placed a light and comfortable diving helmet, and so clad, on the following Christmas Eve, he awaited the coming of his tormentor. It was a bitterly cold night that brought to a close this 24th day of December. The air outside was still, but the temperature was below zero. Within all was quiet, the servants of Harrowby Hall awaiting with beating hearts the outcome of their master's campaign against his supernatural visitor. The master himself was lying on the bed in the haunted room, clad as has already been indicated, and then the clock clanged out the hour of 12. There was a sudden banging of doors. A blast of cold air swept through the halls. The door leading into the haunted chamber flew open. A splash was heard, and the water ghost was seen standing at the side of the heir of Harrowby, from whose outer dress there streamed rivulets of water, but whose own person, deep down under the various garments he wore, was as dry and as warm as he could have wished. "Ha!" said the young master of Harrowby. "I'm glad to see you." "You are the most original man I've met, if that is true," returned the ghost. "May I ask, where did you get that hat?" "Certainly, madam," returned the master courteously. "It is a little portable observatory I had made for just such emergencies as this. But tell me, is it true that you are doomed to follow me about for one mortal hour, to stand where I stand, to sit where I sit?" "That is my delectable fate," returned the lady. "We'll go out to the lake," said the master, starting up. "You can't get rid of me that way," returned the ghost. "The water won't swallow me up. In fact, it will just add to my present bulk." "Nevertheless," said the master firmly, We will go out on the lake. But, my dear sir, returned the ghost with a pale reluctance, it is fearfully cold out there. You will be frozen hard before you've been out 10 minutes. Oh, no, I'll not, replied the master. I am very warmly dressed. Come. This last in a tone of command that made the ghost ripple, and they started. They had not gone far before the water ghost showed signs of distress. You walk too slowly, she said. I am nearly frozen. My knees are so stiff now I can hardly move. I beseech you to accelerate your step. I should like to oblige a lady, returned the master courteously, but my clothes are rather heavy, and 100 yards an hour is about my speed. Indeed, I think we would better sit down here on the snowdrift and talk matters over. Do not do so, I beg, cried the ghost. Let me move on. I feel myself growing rigid as it is. If we stop here, I shall be frozen stiff. That, madam, said the master slowly, and seating himself on an ice cake, that is why I have brought you here. We have been on this spot just 10 minutes. We have 50 more. Take your time about it, madam, but freeze. That is all I ask of you. I cannot move my right leg now, cried the ghost in despair, and my overskirt is a solid sheet of ice. Oh, good, kind Mr. Oglethorpe, light a fire and let me go free from these icy fetters. Never, madam, it cannot be. I have you at last. Alas, cried the ghost, a tear trickling from her frozen cheek. Help me, I beg, I congeal. Congeal, madam, congeal, returned Oglethorpe coldly. You have drenched me in mine for 300 years. 203 years, madam. Tonight you shall have had your last drench. Ah, but I shall thaw out again, and then you'll see. Instead of the comfortably tepid, genial ghost I have been in my past, sir, I shall be iced water, cried the lady threateningly. No, you won't either, returned Oglethorpe. For when you are frozen quite stiff, I shall send you to a cold storage warehouse, and there you shall remain an icy work of art forevermore. But warehouses burn. So they do, but this warehouse cannot burn. It is made of asbestos, and surrounding it are fireproof walls. And within those walls the temperature is now and shall forever be 416 degrees below the 0 point, low enough to make an icicle of any flame in this world or the next, the master added with an ill-suppressed chuckle. For the last time, let me beseech you. I would go on my knees to you, Oglethorpe, if they were not already frozen. I beg of you, do not do. Here even the words froze on the water ghost's lips, and the clock struck 1. There was a momentary tremor throughout the ice-bound form, and the moon, coming out from behind a cloud, shone down on the rigid figure of a beautiful woman sculpted in clear, transparent ice. There stood the ghost of Harrowby Hall, conquered by the cold, a prisoner for all time. The heir of Harrowby had won at last, and today, in a large storage house in London, stands the frigid form of one who will never again flood the house of Oglethorpe with woe and sea-water. As for the heir of Harrowby, his success in coping with a ghost has made him famous, a fame that still lingers about him, although his victory took place some 20 years ago. And so far from being unpopular with the fair sex as he was when we first knew him, he has not only been married twice, but is to lead a third bride to the altar before the year is out. The end.